Hello everyone and welcome to A Problem of Evil. Last week you explored the ideas of Alvin Plantinga, who explained that evil is consistent with the existence of an all-powerful and all-loving God because evil is the product of human free will. Evil and suffering is a consequence of human action, and because of this, God is not responsible for it. You'll remember that this Theodicy was criticised in several ways, both a priori and a posteriori. And so today I'd like to welcome John Hick, who's going to explain a different Theodicy for us. John? John? John. Oh, hello. Now, John. Your Theodicy is known as a soul-making Theodicy. You're inspired in your thoughts. Can you explain your inspiration and background? Well, Derek, you are right that I've found the roots of my ideas in other places. Firstly, in the biblical stories of hardship and suffering, of God's people always enduring, it seems to me, some kind of suffering or other. There seems to be a latent theodicy in the Bible, just waiting to be explored. But I suppose the main foundation of my theodicy is found in another traditional theodicy, known as the Irenaean theodicy. And what I've done is taken key themes from St. Irenaeus' work and built on them. Oh, I see. So, Irenaeus, can you explain the ideas you've used from this great saint's work? Well, yes, I suppose the key idea comes from just one verse in the Bible, Genesis 1:26, in which we are told that mankind was made in God's image and after God's likeness. Now, please look this up, listeners, and jot it down. That's Genesis 1:26. What this said to me was clear, that humans were not made in a completed state. We are made in God's image, and this means that we have free will, but we are made after his likeness. We are not yet perfect like God. This is something that we have to work towards. So yes, from this verse, I see that creation is not a completed project. It's in two stages, and we as humans are children of God who need to grow in perfection, as we are far from perfect now. So you would disagree with Plantinga that God created the universe and all was perfect, and it was only our bad choices that made things go wrong? Yes, I would disagree with Plantinga in this. We do both agree that free will has a big part to play in explaining the existence of evil. But I see free will as a way to start maturing and to bring our relationship with God together further on, and moving on from being immature creatures to form a full and meaningful relationship with God. Now, your theodicy is said to be a soul-making theodicy. Can you explain this idea, John? I would love to, Derek. Now, I have said that my theodicy is very much about growth and movement towards becoming like God or achieving perfection. The way we do this is to develop our souls, and I see this world, this one with all its faults and issues and opportunities to suffer, as a perfect place to do this. It is a Vale of Soulmaking. Now note that down, folks. Vale of Soulmaking. Well, I must say that some people would find it hard to accept that this world is perfect in any way. Some have said that in terms of the amounts of suffering we experience, that this world is the worst of all possible worlds. Now, Derek, listen. This world is the best of all possible worlds. The best. This is because this world serves its purpose as a place in which we can freely grow and develop our virtues and our souls. This is not a world for human pets in which God only wishes to make existence comfortable. No, this is a world in which we are given opportunities to develop as full people. To help you digest this, let me just run you past something I call the counterfactual hypothesis. Now, counterfactual means just think about the opposite case. Can you imagine a world very unlike our own, in which a safe is robbed of money and then the money miraculously just instantly reappears? In which bullets from a gun turn to rubber? In which someone falling from a great height would be saved from a momentary lack of change in the laws of gravity? Things about this world and the complete and utter lack of meaning to it, there would be no study of science, as sometimes laws of gravity apply, sometimes they don't. There would be no consequences to human action, no development of virtues such as kindness and courage, as we would never find ourselves in a situation in which they are needed. This world, without suffering and without evil, would be the worst of all possible worlds for humans to grow into the likeness of God. It would be a world in which nothing would really matter very much. Ah, I see. So you think that the existence of suffering and evil serves a purpose? Oh, yes, Derek, I do. Without hardship, we cannot grow. The world is a vale of soul-making, of free choices. Wrong decisions are all part of this. Children need to grow and experience life to do this. I'm sure you've heard of the expression being wrapped up in cotton wool in terms of overprotective parenting, which in the long term is neither useful or helpful. I have indeed, John. Can you tell me why God, if God exists, doesn't intervene in particular situations when God could? Well, Derek, it is really simple. I believe that in order to really be free and make our own choices and actions, God cannot be obvious in this world. Imagine any situation. If a child has an ever-present, ever-obvious parent, it is never really free. It takes distance and opportunity to really experience freedom. This is why I claim that there has to be an epistemic distance between ourselves and God. Epistemic, meaning knowledge, and I mean by this phrase epistemic distance, I mean that we must have a distance of knowledge of God's presence. If God was obvious, if God was always obvious, then we would never be free, never really be free to act, free to fail, and most importantly, free to grow into the likeness of God. So yes, an epistemic distance is a key element of my theodicy. Well, John, thank you for explaining, but I'm sure you know what's coming next. Not all people are convinced by your theodicy. It does avoid the issues we encountered with Plantinga's theodicy, but there does seem to be a genuine concern over your theodicy not explaining the need for the levels of suffering that we have in our world. If you are arguing that suffering is there to help us grow and develop, how can you explain the suffering of innocence, of children and babies who die so young that they have no way of taking up these opportunities to grow into the likeness of God? If you don't mind, I'd like to refer you to some key examples that have been used to make exactly this point from Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. In this novel, Dostoevsky refers to some examples of suffering in Russia at his time that concerned the issue of suffering of children or innocence. For example, he refers to a situation in which soldiers occupying villages would befriend their youngest children and let them play with their guns, only to eventually throw them up in the air and shoot their eyes out for target practice. Another example concerned a boy of 8. I will read it from the novel. One day, a serf boy, a little child of 8, threw a stone in play and hurt the paw of a general's favourite hound. "Why is my favourite dog lame?" He is told that the boy threw a stone that hurt the dog's paw. "So you did it." The general looked the child up and down. "Take him." He was taken from his mother, and was kept shut up all night. Early that morning, the general comes out and on horseback with the hounds, his dependents, dog boys and huntsmen, all mounted around him in the full hunting parade. The servants are summoned for their edification, and in front of them all stands the mother of the child. The child is brought from the lockup. It's a gloomy, cold, foggy autumn day, a capital day for hunting. The general orders the child to be made undressed. The child is stripped naked. He shivers, numb with terror, not daring to cry. "Make him run," commands the general. "Run, run," shout the dog boys. The boy runs. "At him," yells the general, and he sets the whole pack of hounds onto the child. The hounds catch him and tear him to pieces before his mother's eyes. I believe the general was afterwards declared incapable of administering his estates. Well, what did he deserve? To be shot? To be shot for the satisfaction of our moral feelings? So, John, the question is there. Why do innocents suffer, and why such levels of suffering? I do admit that levels of suffering are hard to explain, but I will say this. This is why I also maintain the idea that everyone, whatever they are and whatever they've done and however little time they've had on this earth, will go to heaven. I believe in a God who is loving, all loving. To have a God who would condemn people eternally to hell does not fit with this. And so babies and children who do suffer on this earth will find God in heaven. Things are put right. But levels of suffering are addressed and explained by my good friend Richard Swinburne, as well as myself, who explains why such levels of suffering are needed. Richard, please join me. Richard. Well, hello, John. Thanks for inviting me along. Yes, levels of suffering. My idea is known as toy world. My ideas are really this, that for anything to have real meaning, then they have to have real consequences. I think of a toy world in which things matter, but not very much. Such levels of experience are not meaningful, not life-changing. Consider a toy train falling off a track. It's inconvenient, but that's the consequence, and it makes very little difference to life. We need to have full consequences and real levels of suffering for life and death to have meaning. Imagine having a limitless amount of coins to spend in a slot machine. The winning and losing would mean nothing. In order for things to mean anything, there must be a limited chance. That's why death is necessary, and death is the biggest source of suffering. If we did not have death, but unlimited chances in a never-ending life, then that life would have no meaning. Richard, thank you. John, just before you go, I do need to raise one other problem with your ideas, and it concerns animals. Your Theodicy is simply based on the growth of a human soul. How then can you explain animal suffering? Well, Derek, I'm of the opinion that animals cannot suffer quite the same levels of suffering as we do. This is because of our complexity and because of our awareness. Animals cannot and do not consider issues of death in the same way. As I say, pain, it is likewise simplified for animals in comparison with human consciousness. By a happy blindness, animals go towards dangers and pains that may lie between the present moment and this inevitable termination, and again by a similar oblivion to the past. What I'm saying there in very fancy terms is that animals are largely ignorant of the past and the future. Richard, would you mind coming back up here? I know that you've got some more ideas on animal suffering. Yes, it's a good job I'm still around. Yes, my views on animal suffering. I'll call upon Rose, deer burning alone in the forest. Do you remember that example to explain the evidential problem of evil? For me, these events are there to inform and to educate other animals to avoid dangers such as forest fires in the future. Again then, I see purpose in the evil and the suffering that we see here on earth on a day-to-day basis. And in that way, we are both very much together. Evil and suffering are consistent with an all-loving and all-powerful God. Evil and suffering have a very clear purpose and can be explained as part of God's creation. Well, many thanks to my guests, John Hick and Richard Swinburne. Join us next time for more ideas on evil.